End of the session. Everyone excited, right? Me too. Any good, exciting plans for the weekend? Anyone has? I am having a staycation. I really need a staycation. So I got to tell you one thing. Yesterday I was supposed to stay back in the hotel. Felt so lonely. Just 1 hour, 10 minutes. I live away from my family. You know what? I took an Uber. Went back, surprised my husband. And I'm like, you know what? Honey, 3 days I'm not going to be there. And then again, next week, 3 days I'm not going to be there. He was like, after freaking 6 months, he said, I love you, honey. Isn't that an achievement? Year-end achievement? So, I think the world of cancer needs an integrated effect on a patient. The drug effect, obviously, which is the pill effect, and also the effect internally for the patient. Really, in my journey that I'm seeing every day through my roles at Quintiles, Quest, Merck, and today at Cancer Genetics, and through my volunteering at International Cancer Advocacy Network and beatcancer.org, what I'm seeing is it's an integrated approach that really cancer needs to take. Ultimately, it is education. Education constantly to the adoption of the drug and the test to the community. Education not just to the patients, but also to the physicians. So that's where I think the business models are coming up. Like, we got to think innovative, how to help ultimately the community in adopting the innovation on a global scale. So I'm not going to bore you guys. We brainstormed quite a bit. Half of the crowd is there, wherein we were on a panel yesterday. Thanks to all of you who were so interactive and who have really contributed to the think tank session. So 4 topics. Obviously, what's the current landscape of companion diagnostic development till commercialization? And then what's the focus on immuno-oncology? I'm sure you guys will just speak back to the slides. I might just test waters in that regard. And then what is the role of business models of diagnostic pharma and lab partners in this strategy from development to commercialization? And then emerging strategies in co-commercialization from lab partners like CGI, our own experiences. Coming to, obviously, who doesn't know the CDX definition here? Everyone of us know, right? It was a sweet, simple definition put out by FDA a little over half decade ago. But today, this definition can go for pages and pages, literally, based on the device, right? So I wish really the practical adoption of CDX have been so simple, like as laid out on this slide. I'm not going to read out of this slide. It's just for an introduction that I'm putting the slide out here about what is really CDX. And this slide is a very important slide about I would say a high-level overview of what was the utilization of the CDX in the past, in the present, and then in the future. In the past, it was primarily used for approval, as you see on the slide here. And then, obviously, the CDX strategy waited until the drugs were approved. Still, we see that strategy, so it was late in the process. And then most of them went off-the-shelf diagnostic assays. But present, it is used for approvability and also reimbursement, which is a much more complex process about that actually defines the adoption of the drug. And then with fast track and breakthrough status drugs, CDX partnerships are blooming in very, very early, and it's an evolving space about how these partnerships are formed or should be formed as well. And then what will be the CDX in the next 10 years? I think this conference should go on for the next 10 years for us to understand. This is a very complex slide. As you see, what are the various steps involved in the development to commercialization of a CDX? It depends on, once again, the final application and also the type of tissue type, the device, and then where you're introducing, what sort of patients you're introducing into, and what sort of intervention therapy. And when it comes to combinations, it's a whole different scenario. But it's a snapshot of how much planning and how many timelines and factors are involved in finally introducing the CDX into the market. For a little bit of a focused topic, let's pick PDL1. We all heard about PDL1 yesterday through our through our folks from Covance, LabCorp, few others, about the challenges in the CDX space, in the immuno-oncology space, how PDL1 has been redefining the treatment regimens in many indications. There is so much hope thanks to all the drug developers working in the immuno-oncology space. Obviously, PDL1, as you know, it's one of the gold standards, one of the technologies from a biomarker standpoint we never even imagined will pick up the pace this much. People were thinking someday distal pathology is going to replace the traditional IHC. So, it's kind of, it's being reinvented. I think it's being more and more complex, given the complexity of various clones. As you see, each clone represented across every drug here. And then how, from a physician's perspective on the right-hand side, as you see, that the evaluation of the patient, what are the various markers that need to be looked at, and how PDL1 has actually been incorporated at a much faster pace that have never been seen in the history into the guidelines of the immunotherapy. But from a lab standpoint, one of the main considerations and limitations is the tissue availability. Tissue is the issue, as Sabita indicated, and a couple of others in the conference. And then, tissue type, tissue heterogeneity, tumor burden, turnaround time, workflow, and cost. This is all speaking from the mind of the pathologist, physician, and patient. So it is very, very pivotal, and how it is approved. It is very important which lab, and what are the regulatory approvals that they have. Is it New York State approved? All of this. It's not an easy story when it comes to the adoption of an even simple IHC test into the oncology community. So these are all the considerations that labs that need to take. That's why commercialization comes into play here, very key, which lab should offer this test. Because given the fact that there are multiple clones, multiple indications from the same pharma company that's going to be approved, and also multiple companies working on the same clone potentially down the road through the combination trials, it's going to be much more complicated. That's why they should be more like center of excellences, which would offer these multiple clones to the community with multiple layers of experience. So now focusing on the role and business models of the various players, including the diagnostic, pharma, and lab partners. This is a beautiful report done by LEK Consulting, thanks to them. So, as you could see, sorry, it's not that clear, is what are the various steps involved in CDX development to commercialization? As you see, there is a role for IVD manufacturer, reference lab, the tools companies, novel technologies, biomarketer CROs, and academic medical centers as well, where a lot of times the biomarker discovery happens in many of them. There is a technology transfer component. So there are multiple stakeholders in the CDX lifecycle, which is kind of, I would say, neglected initially when the partnerships are formed. Sole dependence on the IVD partner is not the right strategy in the long-term vision for adoption of the CDX in the community. I think moving forward, and also some experts really predict that there got to be three-way relationships or even four-way relationships, as we discussed in the panel yesterday, that IVD partners should choose their preferred CRO partners or commercial partners, and also pharma partners should also come into the picture and then take decisions early enough. Because there are some programs which are coming up wherein it will be more than one CDX or more than a couple pharma that are involved. Lessons learned from the HER2 CDX case. There's already a very good lessons learned from HER2. 1.6 million cases of breast cancer annually. And then, in the US, it's 232,000. And then the cost, as you see, it's contributed to 11.6. And then the reflex is done for ISH testing for 35,000 patients. And then, FDA, and then few more tests were introduced, actually, precisely for HER2. And then they were all competing for an annual revenue of 20 million. And nobody really figured out yet, with so many clones, so many approved tests out in the market, a right commercialization strategy. Still, at a reference lab level, we see people using LDTs for her too, even if it is 10 years backstory. So there's a lot of education necessary at the community level to really adopt the right test for the right drug. And then there was reimbursement cuts drastically in 2013, 2014 for IHC. What does it entail for PD-L1? Nobody knows. Really, that's why there got to be collaborations between insurance companies and also the players. And regulatory agencies should come in to really understand and also implement a value-based reimbursement strategies. And disadvantages, obviously, cuts in reimbursement. And then obviously, HER2 is not reimbursed in every country. That's another factor that is clearly neglected. And it comes into more play, more than during the development, it comes into more play during commercialization. How to figure out the path. Even today, we don't have a path for PD-L1 in Latin America. Or you guys are aware of that. There are so many patients in Latin America who cannot get accessed because there are so many regulatory issues. There is no availability of DACA instrument or DACA clone. There are so many multiple layers of complexities. And that's defining, finally, the multiple, I would say, the adoption of the drug globally, which was the whole purpose of accessing the drugs to the patients globally. Patient leakage. That is a very important term that everyone should take into consideration while designing the drugs, which has a companion diagnostic component. And pharma partners really fail. Why? Because they don't really fully appreciate the IVD partners' constraints. Because at the end of the day, in the physician's eyes, IVD partners who are selling kits and instruments, most of them, not all of them. But the technologies that we are relying on, obviously, is the partners wherein they are being perceived as a kit company or an instrument company. And we don't take this into factor during the commercialization stage, which is a very, very important factor. And these factors have potentially led to eligible patients fail to be tested, which is a real unmet need that we really need to address from a community health perspective, because 70% of the practitioners outside in oncology are community-based oncologists. It's only 30% that are cancer centers. So there is a real need for commercialization to be revamped and reinvented. And I will be providing these slides, sorry, once it's actually on your desktop or laptop. Desktop, come on. It's age old. Really? Okay. So you will understand what are the various factors contributing to patient leakage. This slide really scared me. I'm like, really? If this is happening, what are all those efforts that pharma is taking is leading to the adoption of this drug? Really, this issue needs to be very closely addressed. It comes down to awareness of the biomarker, awareness of the drug. Can a rep go and knock the door of a physician? No. Nowadays, community oncologists are under healthcare networks. It's an evolution of the systems. Those days are gone wherein a rep can just walk in with a bunch of candy or gifts and then go to the physician. Those days are gone. So you have to work through healthcare systems. And the rep is more designed to actually sell the drug. They are not supposed to be knowledgeable. And it's a lot of pressure on the reps to really sit down. And at the end of the day, the customer is the pathologist who is going to convince the physician. So there is this whole gap. And obviously, pharma is trying their best to come up with pathology diagnostic liaisons and all of, but still, at the end of the day, there is a direct link between the commercial labs and the pathologist, wherein there are call centers dedicated. Very few of them does it, like CGI, like LabCorp and Quest. Very few of them does these sort of targeted CDX commercialization, wherein they walk through the patient, and also the physician or the nurse, whoever calls them, from not only which test, which drug, but also how to get reimbursed. That's the level of interactions that they have, that we have actually at the community level. And it's very pivotal for a simple IHC test. If this is the level of interaction, imagine for complex NGS tests, if they become companion diagnostics, the level of education that needs to happen. And obviously, our mission, this is the evolution of these integrated partners or players, wherein we are into innovation, and then we are into clinical trial testing support, and also into patient care. That is very much important, wherein you have to be in touch with, on a daily basis, with the patient and physician to appropriately adopt and commercialize the test into the market. And in this regard, I can tell you I highlighted all the areas with the green box because CGI comes into picture in every one of these areas based on the CDX model. We have the honor and pleasure of actually working with Archer Diagnostics from a biomarker technology perspective, IVD technology perspective, and also potential path down the road to become a CDX co-development partner if the biomarker is being adopted in the right direction in the CDX space. We have the honor of working with many other IVD players where we are a CDX execution lab, and also we have every test that is approved as a CDX on our menu that is accessible to the patients in the form of complete programs, which I'll show in the next upcoming slides. So here is just a brief overview of what CGI has done, in addition to, offering tests on our menu out of our Los Angeles lab, out of our New Jersey lab. But we are also, we are creating maximum physician awareness and demand for PD-L1 CDX adoption. We actually collaborate with diagnostic liaisons. It's actually recently announced on the Keytruda website, CGI is one of the preferred referral labs. And we had the honor of actually, being welcomed by Merck, for being one of the preferred labs for PD-L1 because of the awareness that we're actually incorporating into the community with our own efforts of interest to help the patient ultimately. So it's quite an honor to be a part of, Merck's initiatives. And then ensuring, high quality testing across multiple PD-L1 clones. We validated the assay in 21 indications. So, across 4 clones, and we are engaged in multiple trials from many companies, and also, with CDX trials and also biomarker trials where the PD-L1 clone is not at a companion diagnostic. And one of the ways to educate the patient and the physician is actually through the introduction of complete programs, wherein it's a guidance about, it's a suite of assays which are NCCN approved guidelines, and also pharmacodynamic assays that we have developed in relation to the indication, and also companion diagnostic assays. So it's a conglomeration of assays wherein if someone contacts us, it can be pharma, it can be physician, it can be patient, we actually guide them hand in hand about, from an indication perspective, what is it out there available and it's approved to make sense for them to take a better treatment decision, and also better prognosis, diagnosis, theranosis, and also, better clinical trial design and adaptation. Given the fact that CGI is very, very, I would say, disease-focused. We have a lot of focus into solid tumor and heme, and also specialization into lymphoma, multiple myeloma, and also into renal cancer, which we felt like, from a community perspective, there is this unmet need that we need to invest our time and resources into to steer the innovative programs and the drug molecules that are being designed, and also the patients, because these are all prognostic panels as well in a way, as you have seen in the case of NanoString and DLBCL, which has set up a new level of standard and adoption of biomarkers in understanding better the patient segmentations, which is clearly an unmet need in the heme space. And I think you will be seeing more and more, I would say, biomarker strategies potentially taking as a companion or complementary diagnostic strategies. And these are examples, how we guide patients, and this is just a high-level overview. And ultimately, it comes down to education, commercialization strategies are very, very important. I can tell you, pick up the phone, and then the physician is like, I don't care, just whatever clone is available, give me that clone, just screen for it. Or I have a melanoma patient. I'm going to argue with the reimbursement agencies and then put them on PD-L1, Keytruda. I'm just taking out an example. This is the level of lack of knowledge that you're seeing at the community level. So there is really, as a team, we all need to take this as a responsibility. Whoever is designing the companion diagnostic, take early risk assessment strategy. That is very important. Have discussions with the FDA. And the planning and design is very, very critical with an early insight. And before I wrap up the session, spread some sunshine when you come across any patient, anybody, anyone you're walking. If you see, today my Uber driver told me it was surprising, prostate cancer diagnosed 26 years ago. And there was no surgery of his prostate, and he responded well to the treatment. Isn't it beautiful to hear to such stories that we would think it's the end of life when A friend of mine who is a customer of mine and who became a good friend in less than a year is diagnosed with breast cancer, metastatic. It's wherever possible, as blessed scientists we are, you got to be blessed to be in this field. I highly, I can even fight with Trump in that regard. So you got to be really blessed. And please spread your knowledge and passion about what you're contributing to the cancer, because we need generations with passion. We don't want generations with depression. It's like, cancer is sort of becoming a common word. C is standing for common. I see patients from India, 29 to 35-year-old diagnosed with lung cancer, clearly a pollution effect, more and more. Please spread about 3 organizations. I've got no monetary contributions, or I contribute, but I'm like any sort of benefits from that. Beat Cancer. It's all about integrated approach, how you eat and how you can wipe off cancer once you're diagnosed. It's very important. You will see a tremendous integrated effect about what lifestyle. No doctors are trained on nutrition and exercise, how it's going to contribute. Is there a clinical trial designed? How, if a patient is eating well, how is they responding to the drug? No. Do we have money? No. Do we have resources? No. Do we have regulations? No. Can the drug only create the effect? No. The drug will contribute positively, but there's a lot from the patient. Beat Cancer, ICAN, they help patients free secondary consultation. If you know someone needs help, put them in touch. These are all voluntary organizations. And Family Reach. I came across this organization just last week. I was amazed. Joe Biden invited them for Cancer Moonshot. They help families who doesn't have money, who have actually been diagnosed with cancer. Isn't that beautiful service? So thank you very much. Life is beautiful. Spread some sunshine.
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you. Actually, I couldn't agree more with you. I volunteer for ICANN also, and I know Marcia personally, and she's fantastic. So, yeah, ICANN is a fantastic organization to help patients, and you guys can volunteer. It's non-profit, and it's great. I share the enthusiasm. Any questions?
Population medicine going on. I was talking to some physicians, patients and patient families who educate themselves and who are educated enough to really contribute more time during these tough times are more responsive to the drugs because they take a better approach. Because once again, the challenge is community oncologists are not up to speed about the level of the scientific information that is penetrating the community. So there's a study going on actually in one of the, I can refer later, how there's a tremendous effect and response, when families and patients are involved directly. They come up with better options actually, and better ideas. Yeah.
Empowering patients actually is a critical process. The drugs, the pharma companies develop a great drug, diagnostic a great diagnostic, and then it's not used. You go to the community centers, and I learned when I was working at Roche, 50% of the patients that are eligible for treatment get tested. So the other 50% go directly into chemotherapy. And we're talking about a drug, for example, targeted therapy that extends life 3 years versus chemotherapy, which is 6 months. So why? Patients are not tested. And the community doctors don't really know or have the time. They have 15 minutes to treat a patient. Empowering patients is really critical on this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any more comments or questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good
Thank you.
weekend.
That was great. Thank you.